Welcome to Messy Liberation.
Let's get started. Good morning.
Good. Well, it's afternoon for me.
Oh my God. Well, it's afternoon for me too. I genuinely thought it was still morning. It's dark here. And anyway, hi.
Hi.
How are you today?
Yeah, I'm a little out of it. I had to get up earlier than I normally get up. So like way earlier than I normally get up.
Are you prepared to talk about a hot button topic?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, good.
I've got my coffee. I took a little nap after my doctor's appointment, so I'm good.
Well, I'm excited because we are trying to record these and put them out quicker than we have in the past. In the past it was like a 4-day, 5-day lag, and now it's going to be like a 1-2 day lag. So we can be a little more like in the moment. Yeah, to that end, I thought we could talk about something that's very much going on right now in the moment, which is all of these dumb fuck men, pardon my language, thinking that they want to join the WNBA they've really proved their point. Yeah. So I'll do some quick setting of the table for us, if that's okay, because I just did a bunch of research, but feel free to pop in at any point. But I'm just going to tell us like what's led us to this moment we're in with these two former NBA players now declaring their eligibility for the WNBA draft next year. So in the last month or so, kind of what really, I think, ignited a lot of this has obviously been an issue that's been going on across sports for a long time, the issue around trans athletes in sports and all of that. But in the last month, Sophie Cunningham, who's a pretty blonde girl who plays for the Fever, along with notorious flopper Caitlin Clark, who also has been who likes to be one of those, I don't talk politics, basically kind of people. Yeah. So anyway, Sophie Cunningham said that she wants to, quote, protect young girls from competing against, quote, biological men in sports. So she's taking that tact that we've heard from so many others, while also wanting to say that she totally respects and loves and cares for and supports the LGBTQ community, right? But just not in sports. I will also mention that Sophie Cunningham is a very C average basketball player. So there's that. Okay. Not that it matters. She could be the world's greatest athlete and I would still have the same feelings, but I'm just pointing out that in the same vein as Riley Gaines, who's the swimmer who was so upset to have lost to a trans athlete or some nonsense where she just couldn't hack it and then has to blame it on trans athletes. And so it seems often like it's a lot of these folks who can't hack it. Okay. So she says that. She then posed for a picture with Riley Gaines, who is that swimmer, and one of the people who's like leading this older lady who's very much leading this whole thing and runs an apparel company called XXXY Apparel. Okay. So
does she even understand genetics? Does she even understand that? Like,
none of these people, clearly they don't understand genetics because they actually believe there are literally only two biological sexes, right? So they don't understand, they don't want to learn, they don't care to learn, but we'll get to that. Okay, so she poses with Riley Gaines and this woman before a game. That same game, because she'd already made these comments, the coach for the team they were playing that night was wearing a shirt that says protect trans children and had a whole conversation with her beforehand, before the game, which we don't know what that conversation was, but okay. And the coach for the Fever has also said she supports inclusion. I don't know if she's been explicit as this coach was a Minnesota Lynx coach, Cheryl Reeve, who wore the shirt that says protect trans children. Okay. So that all got quite a bit of media attention, just happened in the last month or less. So then the media starts asking people about this question. People are having to deal with this question again, as it pops up every, interestingly, election cycle. And so then the Golden State Valkyries for Gabby Williams, who's an awesome Black woman who said that she would welcome trans athletes to play in the WNBA on her team, or she would be happy to play against them. And she said that she thinks all of the stuff that's coming up, quote, is just another way to kind of attack trans people versus it being like a genuine concern, right? Yeah. Ding, ding, ding. Okay. So that was the background. That's what's got all this buzz going. Sophie Cunningham, pretty white girl, starts all the conversation. Gabby says, she shows up to support, saying, hey, I support trans women. There's t-shirts being worn on both sides. People are really angry with the Fever anyway because of Caitlin Clark and a whole lot of things that seem to be fairly race-based in the ways the reffing is going versus, supporting white Caitlin Clark versus a lot of the Black women in similar scenarios. So there's all this anger brewing anyway. And then What just happened this last few days is former NBA center, and I have to read this because I don't know this person, and I don't think most people probably do unless they're really big NBA fans. But Enes Kanter, who's 34 years old, has declared himself for the WNBA draft, which is next, like, April. He played 11 seasons. He played for the Jazz, the Celtics, the Oklahoma City Thunder. He is 6 years older and 5 inches taller than the average WNBA center. And he said, my team, management team, and I have carefully examined the WNBA's eligibility criteria and governing framework surrounding self-identification and inclusion. Based on the current guidelines, I can and am officially declaring my eligibility for the upcoming draft in April 2027. A few days later, seeing all this attention now that this NBA, Enes Kanter, and I think he adopted the last name Freedom, which I think tells you a little bit about his politics, sadly. Although I will say I read a little about him, and during his time in the NBA, one of the reasons he thinks he was pushed out of the NBA was because of his political activism on behalf of, like, the Uyghurs in China. And, like, I part of me is like, how do you get some stuff so right and then some stuff so wrong? But okay. So he has been a vocal political kind of activist in the past. He thinks that's why he was kicked out. Other people say, bro, your play just wasn't that great by the end of your career. Okay. So, but seeing all this attention that this guy is getting, because he stirred up a whole bunch of tension, like, over the weekend, Royce White decided, hey, I'm also gonna do the same thing. Why not? I want some of this yummy attention that you're getting. So he's a year older than the other guy. He's 35. He declared to you he was the 16th overall draft pick, which sounds pretty good until you learn that he played exactly 3 games 2 years later because of a whole bunch of things. He had mental health issues and he was a mental health advocate. And I appreciate that, especially with a Black man. If you're advocating for mental health, I think that's beautiful. And he was advocating for mental health. Again, how do you get something so right and something so wrong? But he ended up playing exactly 3 games. He played only 3 minutes across those 3 games and scored exactly 0 points in the NBA. Yeah, he's 7 years older, 5 inches taller than the average NBA forward, which is what he plays. But any of them could clearly destroy him. But okay, fine. So but here's the fun twist about this guy and why he's suddenly doing it. He ran for Congress in Minnesota, where he's at, as a far right-wing kind of guy in 22, lost. He ended up being the Republican nominee for Senate in 24, lost to Klobuchar, and he is now trying to become the Senate nominee for the Republicans in Minnesota again. However, there's other candidates, including Michelle Tafoya, whose name may be familiar because she used to be on, like, the radio and the news. She's running as a Republican. It's unlikely he's going to get the nomination, but he, I think, is using this as some last gasps to maybe make a name for himself and get that. So he also has now taken to showing up, talking about how he's in touch with his feminine energy. And of course, some of these sports channels and the right-wing channels love this, and they're giving him quite a bit of attention. And he's talking about he's in touch with his feminine energy. He's shown photos now of him wearing, like, a long hair wig, all of this to try and prove that he is now somehow a woman. Enes, on the other hand, the other guy, has basically just said he will identify as a woman while he's playing basketball if he's allowed into the WNBA. That's his claim to being a woman. And for its part, the WNBA, their eligibility requirements are part of the collective bargaining agreement that the players and managers and all of them come to together. And as it stands now, it says only players who are women are eligible to play in the WNBA. That's what it says. It doesn't say what that means. And up until now, and the WNBA has been around for a while, y'all, has never been an issue. And now the commissioner of the WNBA, Kathy Engelbert, has now said that she has issued a statement, which I'll read in a second, but then has also said there's now going to be, like, a commission of people who will be looking into this. And her statement was that our player eligibility rules, unlike the eligibility rules at other leagues, are collectively bargained, meaning that preserving the integrity of our game and ensuring fair competition will always remain among the league's highest priorities. She has not actually weighed in yet on anything around what does it mean to be a woman, blah, 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 right? So that brings us to where we are now. And the last thing I just want to share as background before I'm like, Taina, the floor is yours, because I can't wait to hear what you have to say, is all of this is obviously happening along the same backdrop that we've been in for a few years now, where anti-trans legislation has for several years now been at a fever pitch across U.S. states and federally. And there is, in this moment, the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act. Notice there's no concern about boys. Very interesting. Okay, we're not worried about trans men playing on boys' teams. I've never once heard anybody say that, but Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act, which is House Resolution 28, which has passed. The House passed this resolution. It is now sitting at the Senate as Senate Bill 9, where it's gone into committee, and a lot of it's going to depend on what happens in November on whether this bill would move forward to be voted on and then move to the president's desk. And it seeks to define sex in school sports solely on quote unquote reproductive biology and genetics at birth. End quote. And again, these are people who don't understand biology or genetics, obviously, which, the opponents obviously say could lead to investigation of genitalia, because what else are we doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it seeks to define sex for Title IX compliance based solely, again, on these same things, meaning Title IX funding, which is what which gives funding for girls, because as we know, across education from our earliest days through college and into professional, women's sports are not given the same amount of money or attention, not because they're not good. It's not because they can't compete. It's not only because of historic legacy, right? So to be able to get any of that, and it would then ban any federal funding for anything that is not Title IX if they allow individuals assigned male at birth to play in quote unquote women's sports. Okay. So that is still sitting there as a possibility of something to happen. That's the backdrop of where we're at now, with Mr. Royce and Mr. Enes, or whatever his name is, Penis, deciding that they need to declare themselves for the draft. All right, Taina, I hit you with this morning.
Freedom.
So you're coming in. Yes, Mr. Freedom. You may be, I'm sure you've probably heard some of this too, but you didn't know we were going to talk about this until just very recently. So I'm curious, after all of that, what are your thoughts?
God, they're dumb.
So that's a really good thought.
Yeah. They're
I honestly am I just want to leave room for all of the and for anyone who's listening and not seeing, I also hope that you can hear the disgust. There's the visible disgust, there's the frustration, there's the anger, the what the fuck kinda.
Yeah. It's people talking about things that they just don't understand. You just don't understand just basic biology science.
Because why, Taina? I mean,
because every fetus starts out, first of all, as a female. You at the moment of conception, every fetus is female.
We're all XX, right? Exactly.
Chromosomically, right?
Yes.
Every chromosome points toward a female fetus at the moment.
Which is why they can't do blood testing until you're
weeks later.
8-ish weeks. I know, because I was a high risk geriatric, whatever they call it now, advanced maternal age pregnancy. I was somebody who was supposed to get genetic testing to make sure everything was okay. And that cannot happen until at least 8 weeks is the earliest they do it. Sometimes they wait slightly longer, because until then, there will be no Y chromosome showing up in your blood.
Yeah.
Right? Because it hasn't developed.
It doesn't even happen until 9 to 10 weeks later. It's all so the thing that's so frustrating about this is that maybe not these male basketball players, and maybe not your transphobic neighbor, right, who just doesn't understand gender and identity and all of that. But the people who have power, who are pushing these laws, pushing these agendas, they know the fucking science. They just don't care.
Because what is it really about? Because that's just it. It is not about.
No, it's not about trans people. It's about upholding heterosexual family values. Because when you do that,
I know why you're saying it, but it makes my skin crawl to even hear family values.
Yeah. Because when you do that, it becomes easier to control women, which means it becomes easier to control the population.
Yep.
That's what this all boils down to. They don't fucking care about trans people.
No.
In the literal, metaphorical, philosophical, spiritual sense of it all, they do not give a shit. What they care about is controlling the population and holding on to their power and their privilege. And in order to do that, then they have to subdue other people. But if there are multiple categories of people to subdue, that becomes harder. It's easier when it's just man versus woman, male versus female. Then their job becomes so much easier.
Then it's really easy when you create a boogeyman that doesn't exist, right?
Yes.
So I might want to make you go to bed at 8 because I just want my night. This is a really weird example, but, and you might be like, I don't want to go to bed. It's not even dark out yet. But if I then create a boogeyman that only shows up at night and only eats the kids who are not asleep by 10 or by 9 or whatever, right? Now suddenly you're afraid of something that isn't real, but it works to my ends. I now get to control you by creating something that isn't there, but that scares you a lot and it scares you into submission into what I want you to do. And that is exactly what it feels like to me. Like you said, it's like they're creating a boogeyman out of using trans folks because you just said we can't trying to control 50% of the population because women are
at least 50%
plus percent. Exactly. Because as you mentioned, we all start out as women. So and actually there are more of us than there are of them, which they know. So if we try to control that, that's that's big order. That's tall order to do that.
Yeah.
But you know how many people are trans? Less than 1% of the population. Now that's a lot easier. If I start to say, I could control that. I could probably handle the literally, and this is true, 10 athletes or 100 athletes. So 2 athletes per state on average. The 100 athletes that are actually trans that are trying to play sports K through 12. There's 100. They estimate this would affect these rules that we're spending all this time on, all this legislation would affect 100 kids. And in the NCAA, I had that stat too. Hold on, let me find it because it's also ridiculous. In the NCAA, it was 10. There are 10. That was the 10. There are 10 openly trans athletes in the NCAA out of 500,000. So if I try to control them, but by doing that, I turn everyone else, I make everyone else afraid of those 10, right? That becomes a lot easier. It becomes a lot easier.
Yeah, because then the people start policing themselves, right? And policing each other. And
because now I got to position myself above those 10.
Yeah.
I can't be a part of that 10.
Of how they got like poor white people to align themselves with rich white people against all Black people, right?
And against their own self-interests. Yeah. Which is what they're doing with women. Against my own self-interest. I'm saying I might allow you to inspect my genitalia so that you don't lump me in with those 10 people.
With those people. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, When you think, going back to, so trans people make up 1% of the population. But when we talk about genetics, there are so many variations. These people who think there are 2 genders, quote unquote, even if you boil it down to sexes, okay? Because gender is an expression, just for people to understand. That is not a biological term, gender.
No,
sex is a biological term. However, there are not just 2 classes or 2 examples of sex. Sex can be a spectrum because you can measure sex in many ways, right? Yeah, there's chromosomes. That's one marker of sex. There's also how sex is presented on the body. And there are people who are very well known to be intersex, meaning they may have both a penis and fully developed breasts. They may have a penis and ovaries. They may have a vagina and testes. There are so many variations on what can happen. And there are people who are born out without a cervix. There are people there are so many genetic variations that can happen that there are not just 2 ways for sex to present. And there is no way to test because I could have XX chromosomes, meaning I should be able to play on the women's team because those are my chromosomes. I could have a penis and have XX chromosomes. Now that is something that people don't understand. I think, and it's easy to lump everyone into the hate bucket, but I think there are people who truly simply just
don't understand.
Like not the lawmakers, like you said. There are people who are
lawmakers, but maybe your next door neighbor, right? Who just doesn't get it. Like they're biologically, humans are so diverse, right? Like there's so many different ways that we show up, and reducing a person to their genitalia, basically what we're doing is we're reducing people to the function of their bodies, to how their bodies function, right?
And what's the next step from that?
Them in that way, which is like a productivity kind of mind fuck.
It leads very quickly down to the road of eugenics as well, right? Because when we start to reduce people to the utility of their body, it's not a hard leap then to go to exactly what we also start to see more and more happening, which is like, ooh, well then does my genetic markers for my child having XYZ whatever abnormality, does that now make them a less valuable human? right?
Yeah.
Like that is when we start to judge bodies based only on how do they function, and does that functionality live up to what we expect or what we have deemed in the norm?
It sets a precedent. It sets a precedent because then it becomes far too easy to say this fetus will be born with a disability and will not be able to function properly. So maybe we should just get rid of it, right? And so, and at the end of the day, right, like that idea, that philosophy of thinking it's eugenics, right?
Exactly.
But also like contextually, like that is the person who is carrying the child that's like their decision to make, right? That's
for sure, but it's
legalized and like systematized and like structured. That's when it becomes a fucking issue, when it's like this structure that supports, right? And that enables that kind of behavior and that kind of thinking.
Because when these kinds of laws exist and you are now a parent in that position of having been told, let's say through genetic testing, your child might have XY chromosomes but have a vagina, or the opposite. When you live in a world like this, you're going to be far more likely to make a decision about that baby's, whether that child, whatever you see it as, whether or not that is going to be a child who's going to be allowed to live. Right. Yeah. And again, I've had abortion care. I think abortion care is necessary and amazing, but it's when we live inside of a system that has started to deem which kinds of people have value or don't have value. And then those things become part of making the decision versus, is this the thing I need in my life for my health, for my mental health, for whatever reason? And when you start making those decisions, because you're like, well, should I live in a world where, I don't know, this child's going to have a really hard life, or, oh my gosh, I can't have that, like whatever horrible words we might use for that, because we live in a system that has now said that person has less value.
Yeah.
That's scary. And then it's not a far leap to go from that to, what does eugenics look like when people are already living? So like we can take abortion out of the discussion and just say, what does that mean for the people who are already alive, who are who already, like, what's happening in their pants is none of my goddamn business.
Right.
And now they're having to worry about, if I go to the bathroom, am I going to have to drop trow to enter the restroom to go pee? And what if I look like a man because, and maybe my chromosomes are a man, but I am actually, my technology.
Yeah.
But I got a vagina and I need to sit down to pee, and that restroom's only got urinals. But now you're telling me because I look like a man, I got to go in there. Like, it's just awful. And then what starts to happen to those folks? Because when we start to dehumanize people, I mean, we see it in Gaza. Once you have dehumanized people, where there are people there who are perfectly content to call people dogs and all kinds of horrific things, it's not a far leap to start to feel like, oh, sure, I'm happy to march those people off to camps. Sure, those people should have to be somewhere else. Their lives don't have value. They should be destroyed.
Yeah, they should be unalived. Yeah.
And I know people think, oh, no, that's not what this is about. This is about protecting the girls. Which brings me to the other thing I want to say, which is, fuck you, protecting girls. Because if these men think what they're doing right now is protecting girls in any way, when what you're talking about is potentially having to have, in sports already, what it could mean is that a girl has to go and have a pelvic exam before being able to participate in sports. And there are states that are talking about that as a thing. You are subjecting girls to doctors who are, we've seen what's happened. I mean, just look at, what was his name? Larry Nassar in gymnastics.
Yeah, the gymnastics doctor.
That you're telling me is protecting girls for the 10 NCAA athletes who might be trans, or the 100 out of all the American school kids who want to participate in sports. You're willing to subject your daughter to, at 10, 8, to say she can play on a little league team? Even if she's in high school or even if she's in college.
Yeah.
And she's now having to have someone inspect her genitalia. And it's
incredibly invasive.
Traumatizing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I think there can potentially be some real trauma in there because it's not about medical care.
No, it's not. It's not.
And just think about, I mean, I think for many girls who have had trauma, sexual trauma, a visit to the gynecologist is already a traumatic experience.
Yeah. There are a lot of women and girls who won't go because of past sexual trauma. Because it's too rough. It's too rough of an experience for them.
And now you're having them go for no medical need other than a visual inspection.
Yeah.
So I do want to shout out Megan Rapinoe, who continues to be one of the most outspoken elite level athletes, who is saying this is all bullshit.
Yeah.
It is not helping. It is dangerous. And that at the core of all of this is about saying we don't want Title IX to exist.
Yeah.
That's the slippery slope we're down, because we see girls getting smarter athletics. Listen, I'm not an athlete, never was. But there is a really wonderful correlation, most especially with girls, because it's a different experience than it is for boys because of funding issues and everything else. That for girls, there is a really strong correlation between being a student athlete and having better student outcomes, academic outcomes, social outcomes, all kinds of things. That's putting women in college. It's making women smarter. It's creating women who are like, don't fuck with me.
Scholarships for student athletes that are women, right? And so Title IX is all about funding, right?
It's funding. Well, it's not just, it's at sponsorship scholarships, yes, but it's also the funding that the schools get to ensure that those programs exist.
Yeah. It's mostly funding, and to reduce it to an athlete's genitalia is like, it's a red herring. Like that's not the real issue here. The issue is the money, like where the money is going and how they want to control the money. And if they were really interested in protecting girls, how about some gun control? How about like harder sentencing or better legislation against sexual assault for women and girls?
How about not assaulting women and girls?
There's
that too, right? Like, I mean, Royce, one of these men who's wanting to be in the WNBA because he wants to protect girls, is actively being charged with and investigated for assault of his ex-wife or his ex-partner.
What?
Yes. He has a current restraining order against him and his child, his teenage son, and his ex-partner, wife, whatever. She has a restraining order for 50 years. You don't get a 50
Yeah, they're usually like a few years at a time, and then you have to like renew it.
It's a 50-year restraining order. That's how scary he is to women. And he thinks that he's doing this. I mean, obviously we know it's not. For him, it's completely a stunt. But like, to frame any of this as protecting women and girls, while meanwhile, you guys aren't doing anything to stop rape, to stop assault, to feed children, like these. You're so worried about these girls. What about the girls who can't have food? And you're like taking away school lunch money, school breakfast money. You're not providing them with education. Because the truth is, what Megan Rapinoe said is, a lot of this is funded by Heritage Foundation that want part of their Project 2025, 2026 that it is now is get rid of Title IX because they don't want girls to have opportunity. They want to control. They want to have girls that they control, and girls who are in sports are harder to control because they tend to be, first of all, physically fit. Mentally
more independent thinking.
It's good for your mental health. It's good for your academics. It's good for your physical health. All sorts of things that they don't want to have.
They're harder to control. They're harder to control, right? And if your aim is to control the population, or at least half the population, right, then your strategy is to tear down the things that make it harder to control that population. So, and also, like, if your goal is to remain in control of the population for forever, then you want your barefoot and pregnant wives at home, not working, not voting, not able to get, abortion care if they want it, or the kind of
divorce
care, or divorce, right? Just popping out kids that you can indoctrinate and continue to wield that control over the country. And that sounds sinister. That's going to sound sinister to someone who might be listening to this who has never thought about it that way. But that is what is fucking happening. Like, if you are a strategic thinker and you know anything about history, if you've studied history, if you have been paying attention to what's going on, that is the fucking strategy. Like, I can literally see the pieces of the puzzle. I can see without reading Project 2025, I don't even have to read that shit to understand what's happening.
But for anybody who's like, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist, just read Project 2025.
It's laid out.
They told us
what they were going to do.
Yeah. And they're doing it.
And
what's upsetting is they're using, so for people who are like, but trans people scare me, or they're not right, it's an abomination, whatever the kind of shit is.
And that's your fucking problem.
Correct. And I want you to know you are being manipulated. You are being used. They are relying on your hatred and or fear. If you're Sophie Cunningham saying, I don't hate anybody. I love everybody. I'm just afraid of, I want to protect girls.
Yeah.
If that's where you're coming from, and trying to find this place of like, or for people who know those people in their lives and are like, how do I share this information without it just being like, you're an asshole? Because I get that, like, that's how I feel. But I just want to say, help people understand that they are being manipulated. They are being used. Their hate or let's say their ignorance and fear.
Yeah, their ignorance and their fear. Yeah.
Is being used as a commodity to serve these people in power who know different and know better. They know that they can tap into that fear, use that fear to achieve the ends that they want. Yeah. Because it's not long before that happens. And the same people, it's so similar to what's, these people who are like the farmers who are turning on Trump, who are like, well, but it wasn't supposed to affect me. Right? Like, but I don't understand.
What the fuck did you think was going to happen?
Okay. But they relied on ignorance and fear, this fear of people taking their jobs, even though they're all farmers who own their own land, whatever. But there's all this fear around
having
immigrants.
like no employees to manage.
Well, that's exactly it. So they were like, I've seen a farmer guy who, or I saw a guy from Haiti who just lost all of his people. He's having to shut all his restaurants down because he has no employees now that they've ended TPS. And his whole thing was like, but Trump's a businessman. I don't understand. So here's what I'm saying. You allowed your fears around going broke, paying too much in taxes. If your version of that fear is trans people, like, I don't know, eating your kids, whatever your bizarre fear is that you have due to ignorance, because you've just never spent time with a trans person, right? You don't understand.
I'm sure they have and just didn't know it.
Well, exactly.
That's the thing too. That's like really frustrating. It's like at some point you've probably interacted with a trans person and just didn't fucking know it because you weren't worried about what was in their fucking pants.
Because they don't have to announce it until you make them have to announce it. Now suddenly you're like, oh,
now it's an issue.
But if that is you and you're talking to that person and it's just like, okay, you're afraid. We all have our fears. Fine. But do you want someone else to capitalize on your fear for their ends? That's their way of, they're controlling you, right? Yeah. You are allowing yourself to be a pawn in their game. And then eventually what's going to happen is you're going to someday, when you have to take your sweet little girl who you love with all your might, you have to take her to some doctor, and it's the team's doctor who has to do an investigation to make sure she has a vagina and ovaries. So now he's putting his fingers inside of your sweet baby girl. And you also then find out later he was doing other things he shouldn't have been because men are sexual predators, right? And we have seen this happen.
Given the opportunity, most men will.
Yep. And then you're going to turn around and say, but that wasn't what I signed up for. It's exactly what you're signing up for. And what you're actually signing up for is at some point, that sweet little girl of yours who wants to play soccer like her brother does, being told, sorry, we don't have a girls team because we don't have any money for girls teams. They've taken away that funding and nobody likes girls sports. Yeah. So sorry, it's not because we don't care, but it's because nobody watches them and nobody likes them. Yeah. So there's no money for that. So instead, why don't you take home that? That's where you're headed. And if you are like, yeah, I'm gung ho on that, then okay, fine. But if you're saying, no, I'm just afraid because I've never met a trans person, it's weird to me because I don't understand it and I'm afraid, go meet a trans person. Go meet one. Have lunch with a trans person and find out, because what you're going to, and if you pay any attention, the people who are diddling kids and getting arrested are all those white male preachers. It is not the
trans people. Yeah. Yeah. That's the other thing too. It's like the people who get discovered as preying on children are not trans people.
No, they're the family values people you mentioned.
Of power.
Yep.
They're pastors, they're politicians, they're coaches, they're, your neighbor has been grooming your family, and, I get it. I get it. Sometimes we're afraid of what we don't understand, what we don't know. Like there are a lot of things that has been the case for me for a lot of different things, including trans people at one time. Like because I grew up evangelical, there were a lot of things about the world that I just didn't understand.
I remember vividly the first time I saw a trans person, and I was in my 20s that I knew. The first time I recognized was like, this person appears to be trans. I didn't even have language for it at that time. In my mind, it was cross-dressing because that's where I was back in that time. And I remember being, I don't know what the right word would be. In my mind, I felt curious. But I could also see where someone might be like taken aback.
Yeah. Yeah. But also like if that's you, like then you do the work of figuring out why you're taken aback. Why are you afraid? Like you don't have to sit down with a trans person to like figure that shit out. Like, you don't necessarily have to expose someone to your discomfort in order to deal with it. Like, read something, watch something, ask yourself a question. What about this person? Why am I afraid of this person? Like, ask yourself why. Because I'm sure if you are completely honest with yourself, you will not have a real answer, a legitimate answer for why you might be afraid of that person.
Or you may, and you can then explore that. Like, the only reason I say that is because I have had to sit with my own discomfort around men and being alone in public, you know, so like the whole, like, would you cross the street if a black man was walking towards you? And my answer has always been yes. But the answer was the same if it's a white man walking towards me. Right. And so I've had to sit with that to explore, is that really true for myself? Is it true if it was a man or white man or a black man? And if I do, is that a real fear? And in my case, it does feel like a real fear because I have real anecdotal evidence that I need to be more cautious around men than I do if it was a woman coming at me.
Yeah.
That said, I'm also not here to legislate men out of existence.
Yeah.
I would try, but it just won't work. So
we're not going to pass a law that says if a man walking by himself on the sidewalk encounters a woman walking on the sidewalk by herself, that he has to go to the other fucking side of the street. Like,
I mean, listen, if we were really about protecting women and girls, we would legislate men out of existence or into their own segregated...
There would be so many restrictions on what men can and can't do if that were really the case.
So I just also think, like, if you are that person, get critical thinking, right? To ask yourself, like, why? Because if you just look at stats, it's very clear, like you were saying, the people who are causing harm to girls are not trans people. It's not trans men, it's not trans women, it is not trans people. So if that's the case, and if we saw where the greatest harm is coming from, why isn't there any legislation, any concern, any separation that we're doing? Yes, men are supposed to use a different bathroom. Is that where most of the harm is happening to girls and women?
No.
Good question to ask yourself.
Like, bathrooms.
Certainly no harm that's come to me from men has ever been in the bathroom. Not to say that doesn't mean that it can't. It could.
I'm sure it has happened, you know,
of course,
here and there, but like
by cis men.
It's happening in offices, right? It's happening in medical exam rooms. It's happening in
your own
homes.
home.
Yeah.
Because the greatest harm to men and to girls and women are their fathers and their partners. By far. If you need anybody needs to look up that stat, I can assure you it's true.
Yeah.
The greatest harm is coming from inside the home. The call is coming from inside
the call is coming from inside the house, people. From inside the house.
And yet, where's the legislation, right?
Yeah.
That father can take his daughter to the bathroom in her home or not, probably.
Yeah.
And that's we're not worried about that, but we're worried about the random trans person that you've never met that is not causing harm.
And then when they do get discovered and they do get, sent to prison or whatever, it's like 2 years, 3 years. And I'm not advocating for harsher prison sentences at all. I am advocating for rehabilitation, right? And so however long they get sent to prison is the issue, but like it's the message that it sends. That is the issue. And the message is like, oh, this is a minor offense. So it's okay for us to just lock you away for 2 years or 5 years and then maybe let you out early for good behavior. And then you can go back out and still be the same kind of person that sent you there in the first place because there's no mental health. There's no transformative justice opportunity, right? To like make things right. Like, so.
Yeah. And what's the message when someone who has caused harm to women and girls gets a very minimal sentence, if any, right? Very minimal accountability, if any. And yet I have to go have my genitals inspected to play sports.
Yeah.
Just tell me how that in your head in any way is sending the right message. To anyone. What is that telling girls? What is that going to tell our girls?
It's telling us that our bodies are better police than men's predatory behavior.
Exactly. It's still the like, what are you wearing vibes? Like, it's just... And so these two schmoes are really...
grifters.
Have really pissed me off because now they're forcing a whole discussion that they don't understand and don't care about and putting all of these people into a position where they have caused a problem that didn't exist. There has not been a problem in the WNBA of trans players, of trans people trying to play, or if there have been trans players, No one's had a problem with it.
Yeah.
No one's called it out. It's not like there's just never been a thing. No one's had any issues with the eligibility requirements. The league's been trucking along, doing great. And in fact, over the last few years, doing better and better. And now they got to deal with this bullshit because of two guys who think they're cute. That's really what they think. They're cute. They think they're being real funny. They think they're gotcha-ing you.
It's a joke to them.
100%.
It's a joke.
Even though, they're both saying, oh, no, in no way. I mean, that Royce guy, who's a real piece of shit, is out there, wearing his little wig, acting all, talking about his feminine energy and yes, queen. Yeah. And they're causing real harm.
Yeah.
They're causing harm to women and girls. They're causing harm to all the women in that league who have to deal with this now. And we know when it comes to these issues, they always fall heaviest on Black women who don't perform femininity in the way that they are expected because femininity is defined by white culture.
By white womanhood, yeah.
And so they can't perform it. So they will be the ones who are going to be questioned and dragged through the mud and have to deal with the consequences because some pretty little blonde girl decided she needed to protect who.
Yeah, yeah.
And I hope Sophie Cunningham is having the day she fucking deserves.
Yeah, I hope they all are. I hope they all are.
Yeah.
Okay. Kind of chic to say, fuck that bitch.
All I know is that, so I also feel really badly for her team because she's got Caitlin Clark and her, who are buds, pretty clearly right-wing nut jobs. But they have the rest of their team that have to deal with this at such a level
bullshit, yeah.
that I feel for them hardcore because they want to win too. Like they're not there to deal with this shit. And yet they have to, and they have to be able to work with these women to be able to, go get the job done that they want to get done. And even if they want to leave the team, they can't do that if the team is their livelihoods depend on this shit.
Yeah.
They got to deal with these people. I feel for them. I do. And I feel for everyone else in the league. And if you think you need to be a Caitlin Clark fan, stop, burn the merch, move on. Paige Beckers, if you're wanting a white woman to root for, there's a lot of amazing Black women in the WNBA. The league was built by and on the backs of Black women. It continues to be dominated by Black women. They continue to be premier athletes. But if you're one of those people who's like, I love Caitlin Clark or I love what's Sophie Cunningham because they're so pretty or whatever, then go love yourself Paige Beckers. Because she is a representative of what it looks like to actually be an ally to all women. She speaks up for Black women. She amplifies their voices. She brings attention to these issues. And she is what it should look like to be an athlete in the WNBA.
Yeah, that's what I want to see more of, like, with this issue, right? I want to see other WNBA players calling this shit out. I want to see other NBA players calling this shit out.
Well, that's the thing I would like to see.
Yeah.
Could we see some men putting these men in their place?
Yeah.
Women shouldn't have to be putting these two schmoes into their place.
Yeah.
Where are the men doing it? Where are they showing up to say, how fragile is your masculinity?
Yeah.
Because that's ultimately what this is about. Their masculinity is that fragile. And I don't know, the one guy, Freedom, he might still be able to compete. But I can tell you right now, Royce White would have his ass handed to him in the WNBA. He's played 3 minutes of NBA and had 0 points and is frankly a bit overweight for his age and for a man and for his height and all of that. So see him. Sure, he's got 5 inches on these women. They would run. I know they would run over him.
They would run circles around him.
There's part of me that's just like, yeah, let him in. Let's see how long he lasts. But, and to end this, I just want to say too, you can declare I can declare myself today eligible for the WNBA draft. I can tell you right now, not one team's going to want me. So these men can declare whatever the fuck they want, right? But ultimately,
it's arbitrary. It doesn't mean anything.
So they're causing all this stink. And the truth is, no team's going to take them anyway because they are 7 years out of, like, they haven't played in the WNBA for a few years. They're old at this point. One of them was never a great player to begin with, like not since college, and he's well past his college days. And they're clearly a cancer to any locker room, so no team would want them anyway. So all of this for something that it's not even real. It's not even real. They can't even, nobody's going to take them. So, but it's got people talking about it, including us. All right. Anything you want to end on?
No, I just want to say, God, just fucking go read a book, touch grass. Please.
Yes. And as somebody who has trans friends, who loves trans people, I'm sure that's both of us, like, give yourself the gift of meeting a trans person. You should be so lucky.
I say this, I've said this before, and I feel like I will say this until I'm blue in the face, until there's no air left in my lungs. But like, how miserable must be your existence to have such a limited perspective of the world and of humanity? Like, that sounds fucking boring.
And it just sounds sad. Like it
Yes.
does like a really sad
Yes.
life. I feel like
I
both
think
those men must be
I
really,
cannot wrap my head
really
around it.
sad. I know, to have so much hate for like people who actually just want to exist.
They just want to just live their life. Like,
what a crime. What a crime, Taina. Anyway. All right. Well, if you're trans and listening, we love you.
we love you.
All right. See you next week. Thanks for listening to Messy Liberation.
Will you please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen?
Taking that moment to do that will really help us reach a wider audience.
Thank you so much for your support and for listening today.
Until next time.